I got one right.
Okay.
Fair enough.
Here's what I need you to look into. Okay? Take out your iPad. A little bit of research here. I need you to find me information on
Still missed a letter even though it's written.
and Arius of Alexandria. Okay? Arius of Alexandria. Basic biographical sketch here. Born, died, contributions, issues, etc. For Arius of Alexandria. Go.
He lived in Alexandria, and their name was Arius.
Fantastic start. Keep going.
His middle name was O.
No.
Thank you.
Like London? Oh, is it this?
I just watched Star Wars. World War
No,
I thought you were gonna write all wrong.
This dude had a rough time with the face lottery, let me tell you.
It's already part of it,
At
right?
least
Come on.
Then Egypt is part of it, but the second section. That's what I'm saying, that it gets broken down.
So you want us to write what part about it?
Just brief biographical sketch. Born, died, major issues. Basically, who was this guy? We're going to talk through some of the most significant pieces of his career, if you will. Say what? Yeah.
Is everybody we study a heretic in some capacity?
No.
Yes.
I mean,
Well, they
Irenaeus
don't start out that
wasn't.
way.
Justin wasn't. Origen
He's
wasn't, and then teetered on the edge. Sort of fell off the precipice. This guy is out and out a problem.
Number one. Well, these dudes are the most fun. This is where the fun.
Oh,
No iPad today?
It's an Aryan.
I'm gonna squish you.
You know, I don't know.
I really am trying.
Maybe
I did think about it last
Like,
night, and then I forgot again.
because
Nice.
that would have why
think
it was
about
the
this.
Arianism.
You know, I could click on it, but then.
Yeah, that's the wrong Arian.
Yeah.
This one's IAN.
Oh, the other one has
Not
a Y.
YAN.
Yeah.
Why?
Somewhere.
Like, did
This-
you originally come up with
this-
that, or
this
was it
Aryan is not the
something
Hitler kind of Aryan.
Did you like come up with it when it was created, or did he like?
He's tapping into a stream of thought that already exists.
Yeah.
And I did once last night. And or I meant to. No,
All right. Ready?
Vaguely.
Okay. When is Arius born?
He lived.
Yeah.
At 256 to.
Constantinople.
Okay. So this is on the AD side of the calendar, right? So we're talking about 3rd and 4th century. Right, lives to 80, so that's a decent lifespan. What do we know about our, I can't really say friend, because I'm not a fan. What do we know about him?
Said some bad stuff about Jesus.
Correct.
He's Neoplatonist.
He is a Platonist, Neo-Platonist. He's in that very interesting blend as far as school of thought is concerned.
He's a priest that developed Arianism.
Correct.
He's his major work is Thalia.
Okay.
He creates a crisis that leads to the Nicene or the Council of Nicaea.
Yes.
The Nicene Creed.
Okay. Anything else?
Got declared a heretic by the Council of Nicaea.
Yep. And then officially excommunicated from the church. Okay. So let's start with this. First, he's been branded a heretic. Okay. Which means the teaching that makes him a heretic, the church, since this teaching has arisen, has condemned as heresy in one way, shape, form, or another. So What I'm going to tell you Arius teaches is not Orthodox Christianity. If somebody tells you that this is Christian, they either don't know what they're talking about, they've been deceived into thinking that it is Christian, or they're just straight up lying to you. Does that make sense? Consider that. He is a heretic because of his teaching related to the person of Jesus Christ. Okay, so what he has to say about Jesus is pretty seriously problematic. And the church, which has since the beginning of the church defined itself primarily around what we say about Jesus Christ, has a very particular problem with what he's about to say. Keep that in mind. Before we get into that completely, we have to start with this, because this is the root form of his thought, and this is what shapes the teaching I'm going to explain to you. And that's, in part, one of the major goals of this class. Can you take somebody's initial statement on its face and start drilling through to the core of what's underneath it? What are the underlying assumptions, presuppositions, and the bedrock that they're basing their other statements upon? Does that make sense? Here's the thing. Number one. He's a Platonist, Neoplatonist. Grows up in these streams of ideas. Okay. One of his primary influences, one of his primary influences in his theological development is Origen of Alexandria, who likewise is steeped in Platonic thought. Okay, go ahead.
Was this before or after he became a heretic?
Well, go back. When does Origen die?
Yeah, Origen is not alive.
Well, I know, but when is 254 is Origen's death. So this is after. This is after. Origen's been dead for 2 years when he is born, right? So it would be the teachings and the writings and the material picked up after the fact. So this is after Origen became a heretic, so to speak. But here's the stream of thought that he latches onto, especially as it relates to Origen. Transcendence and immanence cannot coexist. Or at least they don't naturally. Does that make sense? So this gets to Origen's material on the soul. The soul is a transcendent thing, but it's been put immanent in a body, and that is a problem that needs to be resolved. The soul needs to be set free. The transcendent soul and the immanent human body can't coexist, at least not long term, and they're not naturally designed to do so. Still following me on that? Okay. That means then, if we follow that out, if we're going to assert that God is transcendent, then it automatically means that God cannot be immanent. watching where this is heading then. Carry it on over here. If Jesus Christ is God, then the incarnation is a stain, quote unquote, on the Father.
Yeah, just a little bit here too.
Because what is transcendent does not naturally correspond or relate or cannot also be immanent. So if Jesus became incarnate, but he is the transcendent God, as is the Orthodox Christian teaching, then the teaching of the church doesn't make any sense. Because God is transcendent. But Jesus became like one of us. So which is it? Arius makes this dichotomous because he's a Platonist. Remember? The material and the immaterial, the immanent and the transcendent don't cross. Yes? Okay, so if that's the case, then you can have a handful of options. Beginning with this one. The Son of God has to be a creature created by the Father. Like you and I. Like the angels. The Son of God, in this instance, cannot be something without a beginning. And that's the second point. If the Son of God cannot be transcendent like the Father because of his incarnation, then it holds that he has to be created. Perhaps specifically for an impending incarnation, but he has to be created distinct from the self-existence of God the Father. And if that's the case, then the individual we talk about as God the Son, or the Son of God, has a beginning. Which means that being is not eternal. Creature, created with a beginning. However, this Son of God is a creature created like no other. So the Father is greater than the Son. They're not equal, which is classic Trinitarian theology, right? Father, Son, and Spirit are all equal. Power, eternality, etc. Classic Trinitarian teaching. However, in Arius' view, the Father has to be greater than the Son because the Father created the Son. But Son is greater than all others. So this includes angels, this includes humans, this includes all of it. Whatever the Son is, he is greater than all others. And perhaps was created prior to Genesis chapter 1, but has a beginning nonetheless. Still with me on this? So then we get to the perhaps moments. Perhaps this Jesus is demigod. Half and half. Think Maui. 2. Okay? Or that, right? Hercules. Any of those ancient heroes. Perhaps we're looking at an adoption. We may not, Arius says we may not necessarily be able to say, but either way, not God. Not fully God, as is the Christian tradition. Go ahead. Hang on, wait. What? He's locked into that from Origin on the human soul, and then says that he sees this as a contradictory thing in Origen's insistence on classical Trinitarian theology and the classical Christian opinion on the person of Jesus Christ. And says, well, but hold on, if Origen said that, and this is true in this realm of thinking, then this follows. Right? I mean, he's wrong, but he's not an idiot. Yeah? He has the wrong starting point, and he has the wrong dichotomy. Because throughout the scripture, what is transcendent becomes immanent consistent.
This line of thinking is logical, which is not correct.
Right, yeah. Yeah, it's got a faulty premise at its beginning. God appears to Abraham. There's 2 angels who are described as men, and there's another figure that's clearly God. And the text says that there are 3 men who visited Abraham. Because that's how God, theophany, that's how God has appeared to Abraham. This is right before the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. And they sit down, they share a meal together. And then God says, hey, should I tell Abraham what I'm about to do? And Abraham's over here listening to it. And he, like all of us, goes, wait, yeah, tell me. I want to talk to him. And then he and Abraham have a conversation, like any normal 2 human people would. Genesis chapter 2. God stoops down and forms Adam out of the dust of the ground. That's an imminent statement. God is present to his creation in that moment. The Spirit hovers over the face of the water. That's an imminent thing, yeah? So the dichotomy is false. And that's what leads him down this path. It's logical, but the premise that starts the train of thought is a false one. Because the witness of the scripture is that the God that is transcendent becomes immanent all the time in various ways, places, and events. We can even say that in the death of the firstborn in Egypt. I mean, you can say that in the tent of meeting and the Ark of the Covenant. There's an immanence to that. There's a very present reality to that. Moses in the cloud, it's God in his face. Human glow stick style. Right? Okay. The false dichotomy is what leads him down this road. Yeah? Still with me here? Okay, so here's what happens. He insists, and his tagline becomes this: because he sees Jesus being limited during the period of the incarnation. For example, Jesus is tempted in the wilderness. Because he sees Jesus with limits. For example, Jesus says, nobody knows the day or the hour, referring to his second coming. Not even the Son, only the Father knows. because he sees that limitation in the incarnation, which the church has always maintained as a self-imposed thing for the sake of Jesus' full humanity, he says, God's not limited, Jesus is, there's a problem with Jesus. Because he's working off of this as his foundation. Yeah? You with me so far? So then he says this, and this is his tagline. There was when he was not. So there is some moment, whether it's after the clock starts ticking, Genesis 1:1, or it's before, there is some time, whatever that means, where Jesus does not exist. Okay? We're going to pick up with what with the problem, okay? And I'll have something for you guys to tackle on Wednesday related to this, but here's the deal. This line of thinking and this phrase, there was when he was not, is a tagline currently in play by Jehovah's Witnesses. This is the foundation, or at least part of the foundation, of Jehovah's Witness theology. Jesus Christ is not divine, he's created. Jehovah's Witness will insist Jesus Christ as an incarnation is an incarnation of the Archangel Michael. So in heaven, Jesus is the Archangel Michael. Comes to earth, he's Jesus Christ, does his salvation thing, and then goes back to heaven and is now the Archangel Michael again. Yeah? It's the same line of thought, just rehash. Go ahead.
Do you think that Jesus had to have a body created before he came? Or do you think that...
Me?
Yeah.
No, because I think what we're doing there is we're doing the pre-existent versus the, right? The testimony of the church is Jesus takes up humanity.
Is there real?